He taught them everything: discipline, purpose, persistence. But when death came near, he gathered them one last time and revealed a truth that changed everything. This channel shares real and fictional stories inspired by Napoleon Hill's teachings about faith, discipline, and the hidden forces that shape success. If you believe in the power of the mind and destiny, subscribe now and tell us in the comments what law of success you live by. Time, of course, proved him both right and wrong. He was right that those doors led somewhere. They always do. Every person he trained went somewhere, but not everyone liked the place they arrived. That discovery bothered him more than failure ever had. Because failure, he could treat like a broken bone. You said it. You heal, you move. But this was different. This was worse. Some of his students had money, reputation, admiration, networks, influence, everything the world claps for. And still their eyes, years later, told a different truth. A quiet, exhausted truth. This can't be all truth. And then there were the others. Some who didn't achieve obvious success, at least not by the standards of magazines or bank statements. But they moved like people who were not for sale. They walked with that strange, unteachable calm. They could sleep. They could look you in the eye without needing anything from you. He began to notice that. He began, late in life, to study not just the climb but the face at the top. That's when the question began to live inside him, and it never went away again. How can they all learn the same rules and end up in different worlds? He carried that question with him into old age. He carried it through the passing of years, through the burnout and drift of students who had once promised the sun. He carried it through his own fall, which came like a storm he had pretended he couldn't see. He carried it all the way to the moment when he knew his time here was almost over. And instead of choosing rest, he chose to gather them. It happened on a gray evening, after a slow rain. The old classroom still existed. Smaller than you would think. Wooden floor. One long window that always leaked light like honey in the late afternoon. A chalkboard scarred by years of ambition. The air always held that particular smell of dust and paper and something warm, like old books that still remember the hands that turned them. He sent out the message himself. Not a dramatic speech. Not some final summit announcement. Just a quiet call. I'd like to see you all again. One last lesson. Some of them thought it was sentimental. Some thought it was beneath them. Some assumed he wanted to say goodbye. But all of them came. They arrived one by one. The first to walk in was the one the newspapers had written about. The visionary. The market killer. He stepped through the doorway like a man who had learned to enter a room before his body actually arrived, his name pulling the air with it. Watch him closely and you would see two things at once. The shine of confidence and the thin, restless flicker just beneath it, like a candle that needs to be watched. The second to arrive was different. He paused at the threshold to wipe his shoes so he wouldn't track mud on the old wood. He still wore the same style of jacket he wore 20 years ago. Clean, pressed, respectful. Not expensive. He greeted the room like a sacred place. He sat, quietly, toward the back, not to disappear but to observe. They kept coming. The gambler. The steady one. The one who started strong but faded. The one who never quite forgave himself for quitting. The one who blamed the world. The one who blamed luck. The one who blamed his parents. The one who blamed nobody. Each of them a book with chapters you wouldn't believe. As the room filled, they began to compare themselves to each other. Human nature. Weighing. Measuring. Studying watches, shoes, posture, faces. Trying to guess, in silence, who made it and who didn't. Some looked relieved. Some looked quietly proud. One man kept his hands folded so no one would see how they shook. Then he entered. Age had narrowed him. He no longer carried himself like a man who could do this forever. His body had been humbled. His hair, white and thinning. His skin, softer. His walk, slower. The years had carved him down until only what mattered remained. And strangely, that made him look more powerful, not less. The room rose without thinking. Respect does that. It moves the body before the mind decides. He smiled, the slow, tired kind of smile that comes from love and not performance. He motioned for them to sit. Then he took his place at the front of the room, in front of the same chalkboard he had filled and erased 1,000 times in the past. For a long moment, he didn't speak. He just looked at them. He looked at each face, and each face felt seen in a way that almost hurt. Finally, he said, "Do you know why you're here?" Someone said, "To see you, sir." Someone else said, to say goodbye. Another, trying to sound respectful and failing to hide his impatience, said, you said there was a final lesson. The old man nodded. There is, he said softly. And I owe you an apology before I give it to you. They shifted in their seats. An apology? He turned, slowly, and with effort, lifted a stick of chalk. The board was dusty, and the chalk squealed softly as he wrote. The 10 Laws of Success. He stepped back and studied the words, as if seeing the phrase for the first time. Then he added, in careful letters, a line beneath it. Vision, discipline, faith, persistence, organized planning, decision, desire, imagination, mastermind, action. He underlined each one once. 10 strokes, 10 pillars. How many times, he asked quietly, have you heard me say these? They laughed softly. One man said, 1,000 times. Another, every day for 2 years. Another, from the back, I still have the paper where you made us write them 50 times. He smiled. 50, yes. I was very dramatic back then. The room relaxed a little. The familiarity of those words was comforting. They felt safe here. They felt like they were back in the early days, when the future was still liquid and anything seemed possible. Then his tone changed. I built my life around these laws, he said. I believed in them. I still do. They are true. They work. But they are not complete. Silence. He let that land. I taught you how to move, he said. I never taught you why to move. No one breathed for a moment. He continued. I trained you to fight for what you said you wanted. I taught you to become strategists, tacticians, thinkers, executors. I thought that would be enough. But then I watched something over the years that I could not ignore. I watched some of you rise and become hollow. I watched some of you struggle and become whole. And I asked myself, how can that be? How can a man have everything and hate his reflection? How can another man have almost nothing and sleep like a child? A pair of eyes dropped to the floor. He put the chalk down, but his hand stayed pressed against the board for stability. You could see that standing there cost him effort. I was proud of you, he said. All of you. I was proud of your drive, proud of your fire. But pride can blind a teacher. I thought achievement would heal you. I thought money would quiet your anxiety. I thought status would solve the need to prove yourself. It doesn't. It never has. I should have known. I learned it too late for myself. I don't want you to learn it too late for you. A quiet voice from the second row asked, learn what? The mentor lifted his eyes. That the 10 laws of success don't work unless they are connected to something bigger than you. He let that hang, not in a dramatic way, but like a priest letting the last word of a prayer fade. One of them frowned. Bigger than me? You mean like legacy? He shook his head. No. Legacy is still about you. I'm not talking about being remembered. I'm talking about being used. That word stung the ego in the room. Used. Nobody wants to be used. They want to be celebrated, admired, put on stage, quoted. He saw the resistance. So he told them a story he had never told. He told them about the first time he thought he had made it. He was young, brilliant, full of talk. He could close any deal, bend any room. Opportunities felt infinite. He turned everything into more. More clients, more lines of credit, more praise, more people saying his name like it already belonged in history. He ate that attention like sugar. He began to believe he was destined. Then came the fall. Not a slow decline. Not a quiet recession. A fall. A violent one. A mistake here. A betrayal there. A little arrogance. And the floor opened. He lost money he didn't truly have. He lost trust he thought was permanent. He lost friends who turned out to be invoices with faces. He almost lost himself. He woke up one morning in a house that was no longer fully his, with silence so heavy it felt like a pressure on his chest. And for the first time in years, nobody needed him. All the calls he used to receive stopped. All the invitations gone. All the people who used to check in vanished. And he sat alone and met the person he had been carefully ignoring, himself. I discovered something in that silence, he said. I discovered that I had built a life that demanded I keep performing just to be loved. I had followed every law I taught you. Vision. I had it. Planning. I ran on it. Persistence. I never stopped. Action. Day and night. So why was I empty? I'll tell you. Because everything I did for myself. He looked around the room and watched it sink into faces in real time. Some of them understood immediately. Some resisted. Some were frightened. It is a terrifying thing to discover that the map you've spent half your life walking might be incomplete. What I am about to tell you, he said, is the final law. I call it the law of purpose. And without it, everything else collapses eventually. You can delay that collapse with money, with adrenaline, with distraction, with noise. But collapse is patient. It will wait for you. The room was so quiet he could hear the soft, uneven breath of the man in the front row who hadn't been sleeping well for years. The law of purpose is simple, he said. It asks one question: who does your success serve? He let that sit. Not, what are you trying to achieve? Not, how high are you trying to climb? But, who does your success serve? He pointed to one of the men near the door. When you started, you told me you wanted to build a business to prove you were smarter than everyone who laughed at you in school. You did it. You built it. And then what? You couldn't enjoy it, because every victory still fed the same wound. You never healed. You just fed the hunger. That's not success. That's slavery. The man swallowed hard. He pointed to another. You said you wanted freedom. You called it financial freedom, lifestyle freedom. But what you really meant was escape. You were trying to get away from responsibility. So the moment things got hard, you quit. You dressed quitting up as choosing peace. But it wasn't peace. It was avoidance. That's why you still feel restless. You ran from discomfort instead of running toward meaning. The man's jaw tightened. He pointed to the quiet one in the back. You said you didn't know what you wanted. You just knew you never wanted to watch your mother worry about bills again. You didn't chase status. You chased relief for someone you loved. You were serving something outside yourself before you even had language for it. That's why, even when you failed, you didn't break. You got up. You kept going. You kept learning. You didn't feel entitled to results on your timeline because you weren't doing it to decorate your ego. You were doing it to protect someone. That is purpose. That is why you will win even if it takes you longer. Do you understand? The quiet one in the back stared at the floor because he could feel his eyes starting to burn. The mentor continued. This is what I never said clearly. Desire without purpose is greed. Discipline without purpose is punishment. Action without purpose is chaos. You can chain yourself to the grind. You can wake up at 4 in the morning. You can run 10 plans at once. You can scream that you want it more than anyone. But if you're only doing it to inflate an image of yourself, your soul will fight you. And you can win a war against the world, but you cannot win a war against your own soul. Someone whispered, almost to himself, so what do we do? The mentor smiled sadly. You stop asking, how do I get everything I want? And you start asking, what do I serve that's worth suffering for? That line entered the room like light through a cracked door. Because deep down, every person knows this truth. You are going to suffer anyway. You are going to go through fear, humiliation, uncertainty, exhaustion. That is the entry fee of existence. The real question is whether you are suffering for something that's worthy or for something that's shallow. People break not because suffering is unbearable, but because the suffering feels meaningless. He said, if you suffer only for yourself, you will resent the work. If you suffer for something that lives beyond you, a mission, a principle, a calling, a vow you made to someone you love, a responsibility you chose, you will endure what destroys other people. You will outlast them not because you are stronger, but because you are anchored. He told them about the years after his collapse. He told them about the moment he began to ask different questions. He stopped asking, how can I rebuild my image? And started asking, what can I build that matters even if no one knows I built it? That shift, he said, was the moment his life began to heal. He talked about tutoring kids who had nobody to tell them they weren't stupid. He talked about helping a small bakery stay open during hard months by teaching the owner how to track numbers and negotiate rent. He talked about listening to people who were never listened to. He didn't get paid for most of this. It wasn't strategy. It wasn't marketing. It was service. And slowly, something returned to him that money had never given him. Peace. Sleep. Warmth in the chest instead of pressure. A quiet certainty in his movements. The ability to look in the mirror without negotiating with his reflection. You've been taught your whole life to chase happiness, he said. Forget that. Happiness is fragile. It moves. It changes shape. Chase usefulness. Be useful to something bigger than you. That gives you roots. One of them finally said what several were thinking. Are you saying money doesn't matter? The old man almost laughed. No, he said. Money matters. Abundance matters. Security matters. Comfort matters. Don't romanticize struggle. Poverty will test your spirit in ways that are not noble. But understand this, money is not the God. It is the servant. When you make money the purpose, you will betray yourself. When you make purpose the master, money becomes a tool. And tools behave when they know who's in charge. He walked, slowly, carefully, to his old desk and opened the drawer. Inside was a leather notebook. Dark, worn, softened by years of use. He set it on the desk and opened it. The first page was titled, in block letters, The 10 Laws of Success. Dozens of underlines. Notes in the margins. Angled arrows. Rewrites. You could see his younger mind racing. He turned past that first page. Past the diagrams. Past the systems. Past the schedules. Finally, he reached a page where the handwriting changed. Shakier. Slower. More human. He laid his hand on it. This, he said quietly, is the page I never showed you. They leaned in without meaning to. On that page, in faded ink, was a single paragraph. It read, "If a man serves only himself, his success will demand more from him than it gives back. If a man serves a purpose beyond himself, his success will nourish him as he builds it. This is the law of purpose. Without it, all other laws eventually become cages." No one moved. That sentence opened something in the room that none of them had language for. For some, it felt like relief. For some, it felt like accusation. For some, it felt like home. He closed the notebook. "I called you here because I will not be here much longer," he said simply. "I can feel it. My time is nearly done. I taught you how to push. Tonight, I'm teaching you how to align. You have enough strength. You have enough intelligence. What you need now is alignment. Because misaligned success is just a slower form of failure." Someone in the back, the one who rarely spoke, whispered, "So how do we find our purpose?" The mentor nodded, as if he had been waiting for that question. "You don't find it like you find a lost wallet," he said. "It's not hiding under the couch. It's revealed. And it's revealed by your behavior. You want to know what your purpose is? Look at what breaks your heart that you still feel responsible for fixing. Look at what injustice keeps you awake. Look at who you can't stand to see struggle. Look at the thing you would fight for even if you were tired. That's the place. That's where it's calling from. And it's been calling this entire time." The quiet man in the back closed his eyes. Because he saw it. He saw his mother's hands at the kitchen table, stretching bills, apologizing for not being able to give more, blaming herself for a world that was never fair to her. He had always said he wanted money. But what he had really wanted, what he had never said out loud, was to end that look on her face. That was his engine. That was his why. He felt it land like a key in a lock. Another man in the front swallowed hard. He saw, whether he wanted to or not, that what had driven him from the beginning wasn't love or contribution or duty. It was vengeance. He wanted to prove he wasn't inferior. He wanted to humiliate doubt. He wanted faces from his past to be forced to admit they were wrong. He had won, publicly. He had won loudly. He had won in a way that people clapped for. And yet he woke every morning with his jaw clenched and fell asleep every night with his mind racing through imaginary arguments with ghosts who didn't even remember his name. He realized in that moment that he had built his entire empire around anger. And anger, no matter how productive, always burns the one who carries it. The realization terrified him, because he understood now why nothing felt like enough. You cannot feed rage and expect to be full. The mentor saw that recognition. He gave a small nod. His eyes, for a moment, looked like they used to when he was younger, fierce and compassionate at the same time. "Some of you," he said softly, "are going to walk out of here and keep doing exactly what you've been doing. You will tell yourself that this is poetic but not practical. You will tell yourself that purpose is a luxury. You will tell yourself that pressure leaves you no choice. And in a few years, you will break. Maybe not financially, maybe not publicly, but inside, you will fracture. You will hold your success like a weight, not a blessing. It will cost you your health, your marriage, your sleep, your joy. You will have everything and nothing. And the world will call you a winner anyway." He paused and let his gaze rest on the man in the expensive watch. "And one of you," he said, turning his gaze to the back of the room, "is going to take this seriously." The quiet student didn't move. "You will leave here and you will begin to serve," the mentor continued. "At first it won't look like success. It will look small, humble, slow. People will think you're naive. People will say you lost your edge. But something will happen to you. You will gain an energy that does not come from caffeine or fear. You will begin to attract the right people, Because people can sense when someone is not secretly trying to take from them. You will stop chasing and start becoming. And over time, you will build something so strong that others will think you were lucky. They will call you chosen. They will think it came from talent. Let them think that. You'll know the truth. You'll know it came from alignment. The quiet student finally lifted his head. The mentor's voice softened. I called you all back here because I wanted to watch you hear this, he said. That is my last request as your teacher. Don't just succeed. Align. There were no more questions. The room felt like a church after the last word of a prayer. One by one, they approached him. Some hugged him. Some shook his hand. One man, the one who had money and power and insomnia, tried to say thank you but couldn't because something in his throat was blocking the words. Another simply touched the old notebook with reverence, as if it were holy. Eventually, they left. But not all of them left the same way. Some climbed into cars that cost more than their parents' houses. Some walked alone through wet sidewalks, hands in pockets, mind racing and unwilling to admit it. And one man, the quiet one, stayed behind. Sir, he said. The old mentor turned. I think I know, the young man said. Tell me, said the mentor. The young man swallowed. My purpose, he said quietly, is to make sure people like my mother are never powerless again. The mentor closed his eyes. When he opened them, they were shining. That, he whispered, is a mountain worth climbing. That night, the old man slept better than he had in months. In the days that followed, life continued, the way it always does. The world never pauses just because you had a revelation. The rent is still due. The work still calls. The sun still rises. But inside one of those men, something irreversible had shifted. The quiet student, the one who walked home in the rain, began living by a new rule. He stopped saying, how do I make money fast? And started saying, how do I become impossible to ignore by the people I am here to help? He started small. He met a local shop owner, a woman who was 1 month from closing after 23 years in business. She wasn't lazy. She wasn't foolish. She was tired. The numbers had turned against her. Costs had crawled up like vines. Customers had drifted to big chains where faces are forgettable, but prices are cheap. He sat with her. He listened, really listened, without rushing to make himself sound smart. Then he rearranged her pricing. He gave her a simple, clear daily target. He drafted a message for her most loyal clients, asking them to return for 1 weekend push. He negotiated 2 bills down. He showed her how to talk to her landlord without apologizing for existing. It wasn't glamorous. No spotlight. No applause. She cried when she realized she would be okay. That day changed him. Because he felt something he had never felt when he was chasing success. He felt impact. He realized something else. Impact gives energy. More energy than ego ever did. Ego drains you because ego is never satisfied. But impact feeds you because every act of service feels like proof that you're not wasting your life. He started doing more of that. Quietly. Methodically. He helped a kid who thought he was dumb discover he wasn't dumb, just untrained. He helped a delivery driver renegotiate his hours so he could see his daughter more than twice a week. He helped a woman who thought she was not business-minded realize she'd been running logistics for her entire extended family for 10 years and just never called it leadership. He wasn't making real money yet, but he was making a name. Not the kind of name that trends, the kind of name that circulates quietly from mouth to mouth in rooms that matter. If you're stuck, talk to him. He'll help you. You can trust him. He's not like the others. That sentence, he's not like the others, is the seed of wealth that cannot be stolen. Months turned into a year. That reputation became his foundation. 1 client paid him, then introduced him to 5 others. He built a business, but not one built on manipulation. It was built on usefulness. He chose a mission: give power back to people who were trained to believe they had none. That was his mountain. That was what he served. He worked like a man possessed, but this time the work didn't poison him. He was tired, yes, but he wasn't empty. His exhaustion felt like effort, not like damage. He slept deeply. He woke with clarity. There is a difference between pressure and calling. Calling carries you. Eventually, his business grew large enough to be noticed. Investors called. Journalists called. Of course they did. The world loves results. It just doesn't always understand where they come from. They asked him how he did it. They were expecting tactics, funnels, psychological tricks, secret software. He smiled. I stopped trying to be impressive, he said. I started trying to be in service. Some of them laughed when he said that. They thought it was branding. They thought it was poetic positioning. They wrote their articles anyway, but they wrote them as if he had said something cute, not as if he had handed them the blueprint. Years later, when he was on a stage in front of hundreds of new entrepreneurs, he gave the speech that would go on to be replayed and quoted in countless rooms. He said, "The first time I chased success, I was chasing proof. Proof that I wasn't small. Proof that I wasn't weak. Proof that I mattered. And because I needed proof, I needed constant attention. I needed the world to constantly say, 'Yes, you matter.' That meant I was never safe. I was only as safe as today's validation. That is not success. That is cage building." He took a breath. "The second time I chased success," he said, "I wasn't chasing proof. I was answering responsibility. I wasn't chasing money. I was creating power for people who didn't have it. And when I did that, something strange happened. Money came. Opportunities came. Partnerships came. Good people came. Not because I chased them. Because I had become the kind of person they were already looking for." He let his eyes move across the room. "Everyone tells you to build your network," he said. "That's fine. But understand this. The fastest way to build a powerful network is not by collecting people. It's by becoming the kind of person people feel proud to stand next to. And you cannot become that person without purpose." After the talk, a young listener came up and said, "So purpose is like branding?" He smiled gently. "No," he said. "Branding is the costume. Purpose is the bone structure. Branding is how you present yourself. Purpose is how you live when no one is watching. One fades the second people stop believing you. The other carries you until your last breath." He still visited the old classroom every year on the same day. By then, the mentor was gone. He had passed quietly, without drama, without spectacle. In his final days, he kept his notebook close to him like some men keep photographs. Someone who loved him placed that notebook in his hands after his last breath, then set it gently on his bedside table. It stayed there until the students, now no longer students, but carriers, came to gather what remained. They held a small service. No stage, no microphones, just people who had been shaped by him in ways the world would never be able to track on a chart. At that service, the quiet student, no longer poor, no longer uncertain, no longer quietly apologizing for existing, stood and spoke. He said, "He taught us the 10 laws of success. But his final gift was the law that made the others come alive. He taught us that purpose is not decoration. It is oxygen." There were tears in the room, not because they had lost him, but because they understood what he had given them. He had given them a way to live that would not rot them from the inside. After the service, the notebook was entrusted to the quiet student. He brought it home. For a while, he kept it in a locked drawer, not to hide it, but to honor it. Then, on the anniversary of his teacher's last lesson, he went back to the classroom to return it where it belonged. The building was old now, the paint tired, the floor uneven, but the light still came through that same long window. Late afternoon, honey gold, floating dust. He walked in and felt time fold. He could almost hear the voices again, the pencils tapping, the nervous laughter, the scratch of chalk. He could almost smell the way the room used to smell when everyone in it believed the future was theirs. He walked to the front of the room, to the old desk. He placed the notebook down and opened it, not to the first page, but to the last. The last page wasn't clean. It looked like the mind of a man racing against time to pour out whatever was left before it left with him. Words layered over words. Lines drawn to connect thoughts. Ink smudged by a tired hand. And in the center, circled hard enough to dent the paper, one final sentence. Purpose turns knowledge into power. He traced those words with his thumb. That was it. That was the transmission. All the years, all the systems, all the lessons, all the frameworks, they were engines. But purpose was the spark. Without the spark, metal is just metal. With it, it becomes movement. He sat in the old chair. He closed his eyes. He remembered being young and angry. He remembered wanting revenge against a world that made his mother cry. He remembered the first time he said the words, "I'll make sure you never worry again," and actually meant them. He remembered how small he had felt in this exact room. He remembered how large he felt now, and how that size had nothing to do with his income. He opened his eyes and took out his own notebook. He wrote his own version of the laws. He wrote them slowly, not like a salesman, but like a witness. Vision, he wrote. But then, under it, he added, vision means seeing beyond yourself. Discipline, he wrote. And under it, discipline means honoring what matters even when it stops being exciting. Faith, he wrote. Under it, faith means believing in the seed when the ground still looks like dirt. Persistence. Under it, persistence means suffering for something worthy without calling yourself a victim. Organized planning. Under it, planning is not control. Planning is respect for the mission. Decision. Under it, decision is closing the door on the version of you that hesitates. Desire. Under it, desire must be purified. If it's only about ego, it will turn on you. Imagination. Under it, imagination is rehearsing the future you're committed to creating. Mastermind. Under it, choose people who are driven by purpose, not people who are drunk on applause. Action. Under it, action is the proof you actually believe what you say you believe. Then he added the 11th line. Purpose. And under it, he wrote, purpose is the answer to the question, who benefits from my success besides me? He closed the notebook and felt something settle inside his chest like a final puzzle piece clicking into place. He stood, placed his notebook beside the mentor's, and whispered, "Thank you." As he turned to leave, he glanced at the chalkboard one last time. He could still see the faint outline of words written years ago, now almost erased, but not quite. Success begins in the mind. He smiled because now he understood the part that had never been said out loud. Success begins in the mind, but it survives in the soul. He walked out of the classroom and locked the door behind him, not to keep people out, but to honor the moment. Some doors are not meant to be slammed. They're meant to be closed quietly, with gratitude. He stepped outside into evening air. The world felt the same, but he felt different. Street sounds, faint conversation, the low hum of distant traffic. Everything simple, everything alive. There is a certain way the world looks when you finally know who you are not serving anymore and who you are finally willing to serve. And from that day on, everywhere he went, he carried the final law with him. He taught it in boardrooms to people who thought they already knew everything. He taught it in kitchens to people who thought they weren't built for success. He taught it to teenagers who thought they were already too late. He taught it to men on the edge of quitting and to women who had been carrying the weight of 5 people alone and to anyone who had ever whispered to themselves, "There has to be more than this." He told them this. You will be told to hustle. Hustle is fine, but hustle is noisy. Purpose is quiet. Hustle burns fast. Purpose endures. Hustle wants credit. Purpose doesn't care. Hustle is about you. Purpose is about what moves through you. You will be told to build confidence. Confidence is useful, but confidence without purpose is just arrogance in a nicer suit. When you know your purpose, confidence stops being, "I am unstoppable," and becomes, "This mission matters more than my fear." That kind of confidence can't be stolen. You will be told to chase freedom. Freedom is real, but freedom is not the absence of responsibility. Freedom is choosing your responsibility. Freedom is saying, "This is the weight I'm willing to carry because this weight is worthy." You will be told to visualize the lifestyle. Be careful. Lifestyle is a costume. Meaning is structure. Don't confuse polished surfaces with a stable foundation. A man with a hollow center can live in a glass house on a hill and still hate his reflection. And when they asked him, "Do you believe anyone can succeed?" he answered the same way, always, every time. Everyone can. Not everyone will. Because not everyone is willing to give up the story that their life is supposed to be about them. He never said this with arrogance. He said it with sadness. Because he knew, truly knew, how hard it is to let that story die. The human ego clings. It whispers. It bargains. It says, "But what about me? When is it my turn to feel important?" He understood. He had lived that. He had chased that. He had bled for that. He had nearly lost himself for that. But he had also seen the other side. He had seen what happens when someone stops chasing importance and starts chasing usefulness. And that, in the end, is the quiet miracle that nobody can sell you in a course. When you live for something beyond yourself, you stop begging the world to approve of you. You become unshakable, not because life gets easier, but because your reason to endure becomes non-negotiable. Years later, when people tried to summarize his philosophy in one sentence, they often got it wrong. They called him a motivator. He wasn't. He didn't care about hyping people up. Hype fades. He didn't preach shortcuts. Most shortcuts lead to places not worth staying. He didn't say, "Believe and you'll receive." He thought that was childish. The world is not a vending machine. He He said something else. He said, "Find a reason that outlives you and build your life in service of it. The rest will organize itself around that center. Your discipline will finally make sense. Your sacrifices will finally feel honorable. Your money will finally have a purpose. Your actions will finally feel clean. And your name, whether anyone remembers it or not, will have meant something." Before he died, the mentor wrote one last line in his notebook. His hand was already unsteady. The letters leaned forward like they were trying to walk off the page. The ink had little breaks where the pen skipped, but it was still readable. It said, "When a man serves only himself, he builds walls. When he serves a purpose greater than himself, he builds doors. Through those doors, life walks in." The quiet student, now the teacher, carried that line for the rest of his life. He carried it into every room, every conversation, every decision. He carried it when he had to choose between fast money and honest work. He carried it when he had to choose between ego and impact. He carried it when applause tried to seduce him. He carried it when doubt tried to cripple him. He carried it when fear whispered, "Go back to the comfortable lie." He carried it like a compass. And in the end, that is the difference. That is the line between the ones who rise and stay whole and the ones who rise and slowly shatter. That is the hidden principle that divides the few who truly win from the many who spend their entire lives looking successful and secretly drowning. It is not talent. Talent helps, but it is not decisive. It is not timing. Timing is real, but timing without foundation only creates temporary streaks. It is not luck. Luck is a door someone else opens. Purpose is what keeps you standing once you're inside. The difference is purpose. Purpose turns knowledge into power. Purpose turns struggle into training. Purpose turns rejection into refinement. Purpose turns work into worship. Purpose turns success from a cage into a garden. This is what the mentor wanted them to know. This is why he called them back. This is why his last lesson wasn't about a tactic or a market or a hack. This is why his last breath still sounded peaceful. Because he knew he was sending into the world not just students who could achieve, but men who could carry light. If this story touched you, share it with someone who is tired of chasing without knowing why. And before you sleep tonight, ask yourself, honestly, quietly, without performance, who does my success serve? Because the moment you can answer that, truly answer it, that's the moment your real life begins.